Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something pretty intense, DC Cain's fantasy novel, Onyx Storm. We're working off a really great, detailed review here, which helps us kind of shortcut to the core of this, well, it sounds like a pretty epic and complex book. Our goal, pull out the key stuff, look at the good points, maybe some areas to think about, and figure out who this powerful ride is actually for. Honestly, just hearing it called brutal and emotionally charged, plus that 4.2 out of 5 rating, it already sounds like something worth digging into. Okay, so before we go too far, let's just lay out the basics for Onyx Storm. Published in 2023, authors DC Cain. Genres are listed as epic fantasy, dark fantasy, and sword-and-sorcery. And yeah, that rating is 4.25. Pretty solid.
And that mix of genres, it's important, Dark fantasy straight away tells you it's probably not going to be all sunshine and heroes, more gray areas, tougher themes. And sword and sorcery often means a focus on like individual struggles, maybe more visceral action rather than just huge army clashes.
Right, suggests a more personal, gritty feel.
Exactly. It sets a certain expectation for a mature, maybe darker kind of story.
So the plot itself, what's the core idea here? The review paints this picture of a, brutal world. Politically charged, lots of betrayal, vengeance, standard fantasy stuff, but maybe darker. We follow Cain, a warrior who sounds gifted but tormented. He's bound to this mysterious ancient power, the Onyx. And he's caught up in this big war brewing between empires, magical orders, the whole 9 yards. Seems like he's trying to find answers about himself, this power inside him, but he ends up being a pawn in this massive game involving kings, gods, even monsters. The style sounds like it weaves secrets, morally gray characters, and big battles together pretty tightly.
Yeah, and what's interesting there is the emphasis on morally gray characters and politically charged. It signals right away that this isn't a simple good versus evil story. Choices are going to be tough, probably messy.
Sets the stage for complexity, for sure.
Definitely. It's a hallmark of that darker fantasy. The world isn't black and white, and neither are the people in it.
Okay, so let's get into what the review really liked, the strengths. Where does Onyx Storm really shine? First up is world building, described as vivid, a mix of that gritty medieval realism, but with dark magic layered on top.
Right, the review really praises how Cain builds that sense of place. It talks about like shadowy fortresses, cursed lands, eerie relics, stuff that feels old and dangerous. It's not just wallpaper. It sounds like the world itself, the different factions and nations feel really distinct and, threatening, adds depth to all the political stuff.
Makes sense. A believable world makes the stakes feel higher. Then there's character development. Cain, the protagonist, gets a lot of focus. Sounds complex, layered. Definitely not your standard shining hero. Emotionally scarred, morally conflicted, that really jumps out. Struggling with an inner darkness that helps him, but also, might destroy him.
And it's not just him. The review mentions key side characters, too. Soraya, an assassin with a hidden past. General Vorn, a warlord hungry for power. They sound like they also have these compelling, complicated arcs, which, raises that interesting point about dark fantasy. How do these ambiguous characters actually drive the story forward?
Yeah, does it make it harder to root for someone or more interesting?
Well, the review suggests Cain makes their internal struggles really central to the plot. Their difficult choices, their flaws. That's what makes them feel real, even if you don't always agree with them.
Okay, and themes. The review talks about big ones. Identity, trauma, fate versus free will, the cost of power, and it highlights this constant tension between doing what's right and doing what's necessary. Sounds heavy.
That tension is key, though. It's often what makes dark fantasy compelling. It forces you, the reader, along with the characters, to think about those tough choices. It's less about stating themes outright and more about showing characters wrestling with them in really difficult situations. That's good storytelling.
And finally, under strengths, pacing and structure. Apparently it's well-paced, moves quickly between the personal stuff and the big conflicts, balances introspection with action, uses twists, and reveals well to keep you hooked.
Yeah, and that's crucial for epic fantasy, especially darker stuff. It can get really dense really easily. So if the pacing keeps things moving, keeps that momentum going, even with all the complexity and grimness, that's a major plus. Keeps you turning the pages.
All right, but like we said, no book works for everyone. The review does point out a few things potential readers might want to consider. First one, exposition overload. Sounds like the early chapters might have a bit too much info dumping. Names, places, lore, maybe before you really need it or care, could be overwhelming.
That's a classic challenge in epic fantasy, isn't it? How do you introduce this huge, intricate world without just, dropping a textbook on the reader in chapter 1? It's a fine line. Too much upfront can slow things down, maybe even push some readers away before they get invested. Finding that balance is tricky.
Yeah, I can see that. Then there's something called darkness fatigue. Makes sense for a grim dark book. The tone is described as potentially relentlessly bleak. So some readers might find themselves wishing for, a few lighter moments, a bit of humor or relief.
Exactly. It's inherent in the genre, that bleakness.
Yeah.
But everyone's tolerance level is different, right? What one reader finds immersive and atmospheric, another might just find, exhausting. It really depends on what you're looking for in your fantasy.
It's a fair point. You got to be in the right headspace for relentless grimness sometimes.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely your mileage may vary kind of thing.
And the last point for consideration was about the magic system, the Onyx power. Sounds cool, but the review says its rules are maybe a bit vague.
The classic hard versus soft magic debate. Yeah, the review contrasts it with, say, Sanderson-style systems, where the rules are super clear, almost like science. Onyx Storm sounds like it leans more towards soft magic, more mysterious, less defined limitations.
Which can be cool, adds mystery.
Absolutely.
Right.
But it might frustrate readers who really like understanding the mechanics, who want that predictability and tactical clarity in how magic works. Just a different preference.
Okay, so putting all that together, the strengths, the things to consider, who is this book really for? Who's going to love this deep dive? The review basically says, fans of authors like Joe Abercrombie, Mark Lawrence, Brent Weeks. If that's your kind of fantasy, you're probably in the right place. Readers who enjoy grimdark, morally gray characters, political plotting. Yeah. Anyone looking for that epic, brutal feel with complex characters.
Spot on. And for those readers, the things like darkness fatigue might actually be part of the appeal. It adds to the whole immersive, gritty experience.
Yeah.
It really sounds like a book that knows its audience and delivers for them.
So the final verdict from this review seems to be, Onyx Storm is intense, it's gritty, it's emotionally charged, stands out for mature storytelling, deep character work.
Yep. Might not be for absolutely everyone, especially if you want something lighter, but for readers who appreciate those morally complex stories and high-stakes worlds, It sounds like a really powerful, compelling read.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up. If a story really makes you question things, pulls you into a world that's brutal and complex, how much clarity do you really need from its magic system for it to still grab you? Does the mystery sometimes outweigh the mechanics? Something to chew on.